حاملا معي المودة والصداقة.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofal, and these are today's top stories. Following the latest warnings that flights in and out of Lebanon's Beirut airport are at risk, hunters are shooting down seagulls, which is angering environmentalist movements. Iraqi commanders say that their forces have secured less than a quarter of Mosul University as they face resistance from ISIS in the battle for control of the city. After 8 years in office and a weekly web and radio addresses catered to the public, U.S. President Barack Obama publishes the very last installment. Following the latest warnings that flights in and out of Lebanon's Beirut airport are at risk because of the large number of birds flying over a nearby garbage dump, reports say that hunters are shooting down the seagulls, which is angering environmentalist movements in Lebanon. A Lebanese environmental movement condemned in a statement this morning what it described as the extermination of seagulls, saying hunters are shooting down the birds near the Costa Brava landfill, adding that Lebanon is violating the agreement on conservation of African Eurasian migratory birds. On Thursday, Lebanon had closed the Costa Brava landfill, which lies at the foot of a runway at the Rafiq Hariri International Airport, in response to concerns that seagulls circling around the site pose a threat to aircraft safety. Iraqi commanders say that their forces have secured less than a quarter of Mosul University as they are facing stiff resistance from ISIS in the battle for control of the city. Brigadier General Haydar Fadhil said that Iraqi forces continue to push into the university compound from the southeast a day after they first reached the grounds. Thick clouds of black smoke rose over the sprawling complex, where mortar fire and gunshots could be heard from ongoing clashes. The massive operation to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, from ISIS was launched in October. Since then, Iraqi forces have slowly clawed back about a third of the city. Airstrikes on a rebel-held town in northwestern Syria has killed 8 people, according to a monitor, the latest to hit the area where al-Qaeda's former affiliate has a strong presence. Most of those killed in the Idlib province town of Ma'arat Masrin are civilians, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is saying. Their deaths comes after those of 3 civilians, one of them a child, in strikes on the nearby town of Urum al-Juz late on Friday. Rami Abdurrahman said that strikes were carried out by Russian and Syrian government aircraft. The U.S.-led coalition has carried out airstrikes as well on targets in Idlib in recent weeks. The observatory is saying it determines whose planes carries out raids according to their type, location, flight patterns, and the munitions involved. A ceasefire brokered by regime ally Russia and rebel ally Turkey that went into effect on December 30th has brought relative calm to most of the country. And the Palestinians are saying they may consider reversing recognition of Israel if Donald Trump moves the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. This is according to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in an interview released by the French daily Le Figaro. He was quoted as saying, "I wrote to President-elect Trump to ask him not to do it. Not only would this move deprive the United States of all legitimacy in playing a role in conflict resolution, it would also destroy the two-state solution." Abbas was quoted as saying that Trump, who takes office next Friday, has said he plans to acknowledge Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and relocate the U.S. Embassy there from Tel Aviv. The move is bitterly opposed by Palestinians who see it as a destructive and unilateral action as the status of the city is still contested. The United States and most UN member states do not recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and the city's status is one of the thorniest issues of the decades-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Coming up next, a few more world headlines. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 1620 o'clock English news here on Future TV. A deal between Iran and key world powers to curb Tehran's nuclear program is working, and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump would be wise to preserve it, according to outgoing U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power. Trump, who will take office in 1 week, has threatened to either scrap the nuclear agreement or seek a better deal. Under the agreement, most UN sanctions were lifted a year ago, but Iran is still subject to an UN arms embargo and other restrictions, which are not technically part of the nuclear agreement.
What being united means and taking advantage of multilateralism means is that there are other countries at the table, and including Iran, of course, but also our European friends, Russia, China. So we have succeeded in ensuring that Iran does not develop a nuclear weapon, cutting off its pathways. The IAEA reporting on this, the Joint Commission process, it's working. And, you know, anybody, well, we who see the threat that Iran poses through its destabilizing actions in the region and through its support for terrorism should be, would be very wise to preserve an agreement that denies it a weapon of mass destruction. But also, you know, that is not the sum total of our view of Iran's threat to peace and security. These other issues are absolutely mission critical. At the same time, whether it's on Syria or whether it's on, you know, ensuring or seeking to ensure that we avoid an escalatory cycle, I think it's important that the communication at least continue. That will be, if there's less U.S. leadership at the UN, it will be other countries that step in to fill the void. And I can think of, again, at least a couple countries who do not share our approach to fighting terrorism, to promoting human rights, to respect for international borders. And so I don't think that's something the American people would benefit from, and it certainly isn't something either that the government of Israel would benefit from.
House spokesman Josh Earnest, when addressing possible presidential pardons at the White House briefing, said the situations are quite different in terms of Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. NBC reported that President Barack Obama is seriously considering a pardon for former Army intelligence analyst Manning. Listen to this.
Chelsea Manning is somebody who went through the military criminal justice process, was exposed to due process, was found guilty, was sentenced for her crimes, and she acknowledged wrongdoing. Mr. Snowden fled into the arms of an adversary, and has sought refuge in a country that most recently made a concerted effort to undermine confidence in our democracy. So I think the situation of these two individuals is quite different. I can't speculate at this point about to what degree that will have an impact on the President's consideration of clemency requests. But I know that there's a temptation, because the crimes were relatively similar, to lump the two cases together. But there are some important differences, including the scale of the crimes that were committed and the consequences of their crimes. Obviously, as Chelsea Manning has acknowledged, and as we have said many times, the release of the information that she provided to WikiLeaks was damaging to national security. But the disclosures by Edward Snowden were far more serious and far more dangerous.
After 8 years in office and weekly web and radio addresses catered to the American public, U.S. President Barack Obama published the very last installment in the series with a message of unity. The outgoing president used his his very last weekly message to echo some of the themes from his official farewell address that he delivered in his hometown of Chicago.
This week, I traveled to Chicago to deliver my final farewell address to the nation, following in the tradition of presidents before me. It was an opportunity to say thank you. Whether we've seen eye to eye or rarely agreed at all, my conversations with you, the American people, in living rooms and schools, at farms and on factory floors, at diners and on distant military outposts, all these conversations are what have kept me honest, kept me inspired, and kept me going. Every day I learned from you. You made me a better president, and you made me a better man. Over the course of these 8 years, I've seen the goodness, the resilience, and the hope of the American people. I've seen neighbors looking out for each other as we rescued our economy from the worst crisis of our lifetimes. I've hugged cancer survivors who finally know the security of affordable health care. I've seen communities like Joplin rebuild from disaster, and cities like Boston show the world that no terrorist will ever break the American spirit. I've seen the hopeful faces of young graduates and our newest military officers. I've mourned with grieving families searching for answers, and I found grace in a Charleston church. I've seen our scientists help a paralyzed man regain his sense of touch, and our wounded warriors walk again. I've seen our doctors and volunteers rebuild after earthquakes and stop pandemics in their tracks. I've learned from students who are building robots and curing diseases, and who will change the world in ways we can't even imagine. I've seen the youngest of children remind us of our obligations to care for our refugees, to work in peace, and above all, to look out for each other. That's what's possible when we come together in the slow, hard, sometimes frustrating, but always vital work of self-government. But we can't take our democracy for granted. All of us, regardless of party, should throw ourselves into the work of citizenship. Not just when there's an election, not just when our own narrow interest is at stake, but over the full span of a lifetime. If you're tired of arguing with strangers on the internet, try to talk with one in real life. If something needs fixing, lace up your shoes and do some organizing. If you're disappointed by your elected officials, then grab a clipboard, get some signatures, and run for office yourself. Our success depends on our participation, regardless of which way the pendulum of power swings. It falls on each of us to be guardians of our democracy, to embrace the joyous task we've been given to continually try to improve this great nation of ours. Because for all our outward differences, we all share the same proud title, citizen. It has been the honor of my life to serve you as president. 8 years later, I am even more optimistic about our country's promise, and I look forward to working along your side as a citizen for all my days that remain. Thanks, everybody. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
And on that note, this marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Following the latest warnings that flights in and out of Lebanon's Beirut airport are at risk, hunters are shooting down the seagulls, which is angering environmentalist movements. Iraqi commanders say their forces have secured less than a quarter of Mosul University as they face stiff resistance from ISIS fighters in the battle for control of the city. And after 8 years in office, U.S. President Barack Obama publishes the very last installment of his series to the American public. Those are your Saturday headlines live on Future Television. Catch us again tomorrow for all the latest, and have a good one.
حاملا معي المودة والصداقة